Well, I am Jennifer Weston from NC Cardinal, and on behalf of the organizing committee, we are very glad to welcome you to our first 2019 cataloging working group call, and we're very glad to have all of you with us today. We did have an agenda which is very brief. We set out the link to that, and the link to that is in the chat box. Again, I'll point your attention to the chat box. If you have questions, you can either ask them with your microphone or type into the chat box, and we'll be monitoring that throughout the call. We'll be taking notes on this agenda, the link that was sent out, so don't be worried if you see things being added or changed there. After my welcome here, I've just had a couple of notes to draw your attention to the links that are on the agenda, which will take you back to the working group's wiki, which has all of our past meeting notes on there. So you can see the meeting notes from our last meeting and the several meetings before that. Lots of great resources, links to cataloging bugs, and there's also a link there to announcements about release notes, which is one of the things we usually do in these calls, but today we really have a topic. So this is a themed agenda. We won't spend any time looking at past releases. We'll do that in February. So again, I'll just call your attention to, after this call to make sure that you visit the wiki often, because we update that throughout the month, and our notes are always there. And please share it with anybody who could not attend, and we will put this recording on the wiki as well. With that very brief introduction, I'm going to ask Jane Sandberg then to introduce our presenter for the day. And before I do that, I would like to congratulate Jane on being the Evergreen Contributor of the Month in December. And if you'll see the link on the agenda, you can learn more all about Jane. Congratulations, Jane.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Hey, welcome, everyone. I'd like you all to know Bill Erickson. And Bill works at King County Library System just outside of Seattle. And he's been a longtime member of the Evergreen community. And one of the big projects that he's been working on lately is going through the web client and finding kind of the old-timiest interfaces that use this old JavaScript library called Dojo, and going through those and updating them to use the latest version of Angular, which is a lot more fun for developers to work with. It's a lot more fun in terms of the end product for catalogers to work on. And so I'm really excited that Bill is going to be here to show us some of the work he's done to take two of the really old-timey cataloging interfaces in the web client and bring them into something that works better for everyone.
Thanks, Jane. I'm so glad that you like writing code in the new Angular stuff, because I like it a lot better too. Let's see. Someone's asking 2%. Okay, that went away. All right, so everyone can see my screen. We're all set up and good to go. Before I show the demo, I wanted to mention there's a wiki page that I have set up, and specifically for the catalog. I'm going to look at the catalog second, because I think we'll spend more time on that. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention that if you go to the wiki, and instead of memorizing the URL, if you go to recent changes up at the top, and then it's one of the first ones here, the dev, browser staff, Angular staff catalog. This is my kind of working notes for the catalog project in progress. Okay, so stepping back a little bit, and actually, I'll just say also, if you're not actively talking, if you could mute your microphone, that would cut back on background noise. And also, feel free to ask me questions as we go, especially if it's something related to what we're looking at. If you have anything that's more, you think maybe more in-depth and more complicated, then it may be better to hold that off to the end. But if we're looking at a specific interface, then feel free to jump in and ask, and we can talk about it. So as Jane said, I'm working on getting the old-timiest interfaces brought over to the new Angular browser client. The first one is the Mark import-export interface. We had a lot of interest at King County for fixing some of the issues there. Like, there are some stability issues with how it reports, progress as far as long-running imports and things like that. So I took the opportunity to bring that code over to the new Angular stuff, and then add a few bits of improvements. So I'll start there as far as the demo goes. And also I'll mention this dev server that I'm using. If we want to put these in the notes, that's fine. It's a public server, and it'll be up for probably another week or two. So anyone's welcome to log on there and look around. I'm hoping to put all of this more experimental code on a different server soon, which is why this one won't stay up forever. I want to get one with a proper host name. This is a temporary solution. So I have my branch running on this server, and when we navigate to the Mark Batch Import Exports, it is, of course, going to look quite different because it's using all the new Angular and Bootstrap components. The functionality is going to be 95% the same as what you're accustomed to with the, I'm going to call it Vandelay. It's just easier to say, with the Vandelay interface. The new things that are here, well, it's obviously laid out differently, but the new things are here are I've added the ability to create templates for the import form. So as you fill out various checkboxes and select your profiles and whatnot here, you can save those as name templates. Whereas I believe in the current one, the checkboxes are sticky, so you just whatever you did last is what comes up. So in this case, you can save different templates, and then you can save a default template as well to come up first when you load the page. The other new things here are I've added a field called session name, and this will make more sense in a little bit when I show you the recent imports tab. But the idea is that you can optionally give a name to an import, and then that name will show up in other interfaces. It makes it a little bit easier to refer back to the one particular import that you did. The rest of these, I think you'll all recognize. You're choosing your queue, choosing your max set, holdings import profile, all that fun stuff. Nothing's really different there. But I'll go ahead and run through a quick import just to demonstrate. So I'm going to create a new queue, import non-matching, choose a file, and now that we have enough options chosen, the upload option is available. Go ahead and click that. And we have these three sort of progress bars along the bottom. The first one is just pushing the file to the server. The second one is queuing the records. And then the third one are the actual imports. So it will give you progress information for each of those as they go. I'm going to pause for a second because I'm getting some, I think, questions maybe. Oh, okay, so it looks like we have some pretty slow screen refresh rates going on. I'll move as slowly as I can. I'm not really sure what else I can do to help that, though. So after the import is done, we have all the progress meters have all been updated, and then we have the option to jump to the queue. So I will go ahead and do that. Options in the queue interface should be, again, consistent with what you're used to. The actions, the summaries, the filters, those are all identical to the way they are in the Dojo interface. The queue list here, the items in the queue are using the new grid. So you get the grid controls for the new grids, and the paging and all that fun stuff. And one thing I wanted to mention while I'm in here is the new Angular grids have keyboard navigation, so you can focus a row and then go up, down with the keyboard. And keyboard right will go to the next page, keyboard left will go to the previous page. And for grids where a double-click action is assigned, then enter will also work. So if you're just going down and hit enter, it'll go to whatever page is assigned to that action. In this case, it's details about the record. I'm not going to go through all of these functionalities because there's really not a lot new here. So I want to step back and focus more on the new stuff and just kind of quickly bounce through and let you see what the interfaces look like. So I want to jump through a couple tabs real quick just to see. I'm going to save recent imports for last. So look at exports. Functionality is identical. It's laid out a little bit different. Should be no real surprises there. One thing that is different here is there's more detail about the progress of the export. I don't have a large file. Let's see, can I just do comma separated? I forget if that works. Except my comma doesn't work on this keyboard. Oh, Mac. Wow, okay, that's bad. Anyway, export a record. If it was a file of 1,000 records, then that little progress bar that very quickly popped up that most of you didn't see would be showing you, I think it shows you the actual bytes that are being downloaded, and so you can see how the progress is moving along. The configuration interfaces, again, these are nothing new, just they're all using the grid, so you have a better sense of a little bit more consistency with the rest of the interface. Inspect queue, you can do the different queue types, you can delete the queues from here. Also, grid interface. Same with match sets, import profiles, overlay profiles. So the last thing I really wanted to look at here was the recent imports interface. If I am importing a record, and I know it's going to take a little bit longer, choose a slightly larger file here. All right, 1,000 records. And I initiate the import here, then we get the upload, we get the in-queue progress. Now if I go do something else, anywhere else in the staff client, whatever it may be, and then I come back to the recent imports tab over here on the right, it's going to show me by default what I've done today, sorted by the import time, and right now you can see there's this one that's still running. So you can get back to an import that's already been started and check on the status of the import. And you can also look for imports that go way back into the past if you're just curious. And this is where that session name comes into play. If I had applied a name, it would show up here. So that's kind of the big changes. So I'll pause for a second for questions.
Can you create a queue and not load it?
Create a queue and not load it.
We do
As
that
in
now, so that we can review the records in the queue before we actually load them.
Oh, yes, you can do that. If you don't choose any of the import options over here on the right,
it's the same. Yeah.
It's the same.
Thanks.
I'm checking my notes to make sure I didn't forget anything. Oh yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to mention that's generically part of the new Angular grids. If you pull up a grid with long text in it like this, in addition to the tooltips, there's an option in the newer grid to expand vertically. So I click that, and then it just makes the rows expand out so you can see all the text, which I thought was kind of a nice thing to add. Let's see, someone question in the chat room, is there an upper limit on the file size of records? The only limits are going to be whatever limits are in place either on the web server or in the Evergreen configuration. So I think by default there's usually some kind of lower limit in the web server that says if you upload greater than so many megabytes, it might block it, but you can change that. So as far as uploading is concerned, there are no limits that I'm aware of as long as you change those configurations. And because of the way we track Vandalay sessions now, you shouldn't have that problem where you start an upload and then it just sort of seems to freeze, even though maybe it's continuing on the back end. Now we track every record on the back end and update that information in the database as it's happening, so then you can go back after the fact and see what's going on, which is how we're able to build the recent imports interface. Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat room, so I'm going to move on to the catalog now. So this is going to be, a little bit more controversial, a little bit more experimental. The idea here, of course, just like the Mark import-export, is to bring some of the older interfaces over into the web client. And also like the Mark import interface, it's not just that it's the old sort of Dojo code or whatnot. It's also the fact that we have to display it kind of in a window inside of the interface, an iframe, and so that window it's not the most user-friendly way to interact with a web page, and it has its own complications that come with it. So there are multiple reasons why I was personally really excited about moving some of these interfaces over. And so the catalog project the idea for the catalog project is, again, take the existing functionality and bring it over as is. The goal being that we are not, starting off on some new, some big, huge new project where we're sort of redefining all of the behavior. We already have all of these APIs. We already know how all of these things work. We just want to get the code over to a different UI structure. So with that in mind, what I've done is I've taken all of the stuff from the embedded PPAC now, brought it over, and in a few cases I have just sort of made some decisions about how it makes sense to me to lay some certain things out or display certain things. I fully expect some of this to change. And that's fine. The UI tweaks after the fact are not the hard part. The hard part is just getting all the code wired up to return the results and display the data we need. So, if you see anything that I demoed today that seems strange or it's like, oh, we got to change that, that's all part of the project. For now, I just want to get all the functionality over so we can get off the old code and get onto the new code and start building from there. And also because it is a staff-focused interface and this is not meant to be for patrons, some of the decisions are based kind of around that fact. Some things may be slightly more advanced feeling than what you might have in a patron interface. So with that in mind, I have this enabled on my dev server just as a secondary option for the catalog. I have it labeled as experimental. If you go in here, then you're immediately greeted with something that looks pretty similar to what you're used to, the various keyword search options. One thing you might notice up front is they're not individually labeled. I just put the labels inside the selectors. The idea there being to save room, but that's just a decision I made. Some of the other options are hidden, so I have a little drop-down icon over here for toggling search filters, and that pulls up the other kind of extended advanced search page filters, including the copy location filter and all that. Part of the reason I designed it like this is, I'll demonstrate why. When I go to the current catalog and do a Boolean search, then the results, there's no way to represent that search in this interface, so that's why we have the query language populated into the search box. So that always bugged me, and it always left room for improvement. So my approach to that was simply to always have the filters available on every page. So the same search there, be what, music, and then optionally add out Boolean, do the search, and then, on the search page and the results page, it's just, you have the form, it's always there. It's not trying to decipher between two different ways of representing the search. Other differences in the main form here are I put the library filter up on the top right, and the reason I did that is because all of the search tabs have some kind of library filtering involved, and my hope was, or my goal was, that instead of kind of duplicating that in all the different forms, that you would just have, this is where I'm searching, and then that would apply to whatever part of the subform over here that you're looking at. I'm just going to check the box real quick. Question came up, can you still type the query syntax into those keyword boxes? Yes, you can still type the query syntax into the keyword boxes. That part of the functionality is the same. Okay. So I performed a search, and another thing that's a little bit more staff focused is on the search results. There's not a lot of explanation about what these numbers are. I'm demonstrating, who edited the MARC record, who created the MARC record. I'm sure there's other data we want to display here. I suspect we'll want some call number information. In case it's not clear, these numbers are available copies versus total copies at each location. And of course, hold counts and TCM. The facets are the same. We have the baskets, which are the same. I believe I've duplicated the behavior identically, but that'll be a little bit more testing, I'm sure, to make sure that's all the same. But we can add to baskets, and then we have the same list of functionality here. These are all implemented. At some point, I'm also going to add a MARC export option to this, so that you can search the catalog and export records directly from there. The other search tabs, we have, of course, the numeric search, same options. I have not implemented the call number search yet, and this is just really a general question for the room. We don't have to answer it now, but and I put this question on the wiki as well. I'm curious about how much staff actually use that call number browse, and whether it would make more sense to have it look more like the regular browse interface where it's a list instead of the Brady Bunch box thing. But again, we don't have to figure that out now. Just before we implement it, it might be a good idea to get some feedback on that one. MARC search, same as before. And then browse search is going to look a little different. Let's see. Should be fairly similar. Right now it's probably just showing more hits and maybe one or two bits of functionality that I have not yet implemented. But the basic functionality is there. We have the links to the records, the constituent records, and the C references. I click on one of these, it'll take me to the subordinate records and give me a kind of an indication here of what I'm browsing, what record I'm clicked on. So I'm going to pause before I jump to the record detail page and see if there's any more questions in the chat box. Okay. Okay, so it seems like a lot of support for a list-based call number browse. I am always happy to see discussions on the list. So yeah, certainly no problem there to request feedback about the call number display on the list. And really, any of the stuff that you see here, feedback on the list is great. If everyone in this room says we want X, I think there's a good chance that that's the way it's going to go. But it's always good to get buy-in. Okay, I'm going to jump to the record detail page, and so I'll just pick this record. This should look pretty similar to the catalog in the browser client now, with the obvious exception of the search box being persistent along the top. results navigation, these various Mark IV actions, other actions. I don't have the serials button up here yet. It's noted in the wiki. Functionality that does not yet exist in the newest form of Angular, but does exist in the browser client, is accessible basically by jumping to it from here. So if I am in this interface and I want to edit the Mark record, for example, and I click on the Mark Edit tab. The Mark Edit tab isn't implemented yet in the new catalog, but it is available in the browser client. So if I click on that, then it's going to take me to the Mark Editor, the browser client. So there is a level of integration there, which I hope will make this easier for testing in the wild, for doing some beta testing. That in the sense that you can pretty much use this minus a few features. A new link here, view and catalog. So this interface is designed for staff. It's inside of the staff client. However, obviously you may want to see what it looks like to patrons. So the view and catalog will just open a new tab and take it to the regular sort of TPAC view. You'll notice that right now the header part of this page is gone, and that has to do with the way we decide whether or not you're inside the staff client or not. And that'll come back once we fix that. But right now you're missing the top part of the catalog. And it's because I'm logged in with a workstation. But that's the idea. So you can see what the patient sees easily enough with one click. Moving down, we have the usual stuff. The copy grid is now in a proper grid. So you have the column pickers down here, and you can change the rows all in real time. The other data should look consistent. The view and edit options, kind of like the Mark Edit, it'll take you to the existing web staff version. The Mark Edit, view holds, monograph parts, and conjoined items all jump to the current browser client view. The ones that have been brought over are the copy table, the Mark view, which is nice and simple, and I brought over the monograph parts too as well, because that was a nice simple grid to bring over. So the part of the project going forward will be to bring all of these tabs over, and some of those will be pretty large projects, because view holds, for example, when I go there, it pulls up all the holds, but then you have, I can't open the actions because I can't select the hold because I don't have any holds, but under the action selector, there's like 30 odd things, and so those will all have to be brought over as well before we can just bring the grid over, which is why they're not over there yet. Okay, let me check my notes. I'm sure I've covered the things I wanted to cover. Oh yeah, place holds. That's important. So I'm going to go back to my search page. Well, I'll just do another search. And place hold option over here. But we also have place hold from a basket. So if I just go to my basket, I can view it here. Or I can jump straight to the place hold option. So regular hold filter stuff along the top, is this for a patron, is this for the staff account? The search button is disabled because that's another thing that hasn't been brought over, because that means bringing over the entire patron search component, which is pretty big. And then the holds that we're placing are listed along the bottom. And the way I've done this, I'm hoping I'm making this a little bit more friendly, is, I'll just place a hold. So we have these two items here. Place the hold, and what you'll see is the hold status column here. It will update with the information as it arrives. And place hold processing, hold succeeded, hold processing, hold succeeded. So had the holds not succeeded and had the reason they failed been something you could override, then the override action will be available in this column. But in any event, there'd be information here about why it didn't succeed, kind of similar to the way it already does. If it's a call number hold, of course, it'll show the call number. Same for the copy. I don't have parts holds supported yet, so I have to integrate parts for that. I do have meta record holds. Let me pull up an example of that. So if we place hold from the group formats and additions page, pulls up with the format and language selectors. And yeah, okay. So I kind of power through a lot of stuff really quick. So I'm going to pause and look at the chat box. Okay, great question. Copy table and the holdings view seem like duplicates to me. What are the differences, and why would we use one over the other? I have the same question, and we don't actually have to. The reason they're there is simply because I wanted to bring functionality over as is as much as possible, so that no functionality was lost going into it, and people could hit the ground running and use a new interface. I think it would be perfectly reasonable to me to combine the copy table and the holdings view into a single thing that's both good for viewing and for editing holdings. Let's see. Okay, no more chat questions. So, shall I talk a little bit about the project in general? Is there anything else anyone wants to see on the interface? Okay. So this is like the other browser client projects, except it's obviously a lot bigger, and it's going to require a whole lot more testing and a lot more just people reviewing to make sure things are where they need to be, and make sure it works for staff of all different levels. So the idea right now, the last time we talked about this in the developer meeting, the idea was to take the code updates that I've done so far for this development cycle and get them into Evergreen, and probably have some way, like a library setting or some other way to turn this thing on as an experimental site, pretty much what I have up here. So that you could turn this on into like locations and, have your staff kind of experiment with it and try to do some real work with it, or just poke around with it, or however far you want to take the testing. Again, the goal is to make it as usable as possible, but it will be a little bit confusing because sometimes you'll end up in the existing catalog and sometimes you'll end up here, depending on how you navigate. So it's not something you probably want to turn on for everyone on day one. As far as this development cycle goes, this is probably about as far as I'll be able to take it. And then the hope, of course, will be that we can bring over the remaining functionality, the mark edit and the holdings view, the holdings view and all the other things in the coming development cycles, so that we can, over time, retire the existing catalog. So yeah, that's pretty much the plan for that. And as far as the mark edit, import, export, apart from bug fixing and a little bit more review, it's done. It already has a pull request on it, so I expect that it'll be part of 3.3. And I think I've gone through all my items.
Thanks so much, Bill. Does anybody have any more questions for Bill?
I think I was just trying to capture on the notes the couple of different things that we wanted to talk about, but there were just a couple, so I'll send those out afterwards to look at. And Bill, did you want to share, or did you, while I was taking notes, the summary that you've done on the wiki already about all the different pieces that you've already completed?
Oh yeah, I will jump back to here. I've linked from the blog as well. So there's the Angular staff catalog launchpad ticket, and I put a link to the wiki in the ticket. And so I went through, and everything I could think of that is already done, I've listed along the top. And then there's a list of pending development items down at the bottom. I mentioned most of these. Let's see. I didn't mention search highlighting. That has not been brought over yet, but I did, of course, document it here. And then there's my call number browse questions that we talked about. Copy location groups are not done yet. Yep, linking for copy holds, line holds, etc. Basket sorting. Okay, yeah, most of the other stuff I talked about. But I will try to keep this up to date as I'm going through development. And any questions or any discussion anybody wants to have, the Launchpad ticket is great for questions and technical stuff. Any of the questions that we think, we want to get buy-in from everyone, we want feedback, then the list, of course, is going to be the better place for that. And it occurred to me when I was invited to talk to you guys that I'm not on the cataloger list. I probably should be. So I will get on there and pay attention to that. I forget that they always listed there. I just always assume people are going to use the general list, but that's my own naivete. So yeah, I'll be paying attention to that, and yeah, those I think that's all the resources. Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think you've got one more question in the chat box.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, okay. Another good question. Will the changes to Vandalay impact the load mark record for acquisitions? As of right now, it does not. Acquisition still links to the Dojo-based interface. Obviously, we wanted to use the new interface, but it's not ported over yet. And part of that has to do with the fact that there's already an acquisitions project kind of underway, and so there's sort of like left a moat there so that we're not stepping on each other's toes. So whenever we get to a reasonable point to implement that, then we'll look at that.
Well, Bill, I want to thank you so much for all this work that you've done and for joining us today. It's been great having you.
Yes, thanks for the invite. I appreciate it. I was really eager to get some more eyes on this because obviously it's a huge project, and I've talked about it with developers and everything, but it's not the same as getting you all to look at it. That's what we really need now before we get too far off in one direction that isn't going to work or something. So I'm glad you all could let me do this. And as that's all, actually, I'm gonna bid you all farewell and get back to my coding.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bill. We do appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.